Savarkar betrayed Netaji when he was building the INA.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sampath, for coming on the show. You have been one of the few people I really wanted to talk to. After watching every bit of your content, every bit of your word, I'm like crazy fanboying now. So thank you so much for coming.
Great pleasure to have met you in person in Thane and then now catching up as a follow up on this chat with you. Looking forward.
Definitely, definitely. So, sir, I wanted to start this conversation by asking you the same question I asked you in Thane that day. That why is this person, Veer Savarkar, so controversial that either people think of him as a god or they think of him as the devil? Like the only other person I could make corrections with or found him very similar with was Gandhiji, who was also similar, where some people considered him a god or some people consider him a devil. So why is that? I wanted to know that from you.
So Gandhiji would be a separate topic to discuss,
Yeah.
but we'll stick to Veer Savarkar. And so, in his case, I think, as I've always said, both those who are his opponents and his proponents, I don't think they've done entire justice to him. The opponents obviously will not. Because they are opposed to him, but those who are in his favor too, I don't think many people have really bothered to kind of go through the copious amount of literature that he's produced in his 8 decades of his stormy life. As you know, and as many people in Maharashtra know, he was a prolific writer, a very sensitive poet, a playwright, a journalist, an amateur historian of sorts, and a very, very fiery orator, political ideologue, and his entire copious amount of literature is compiled in the Savarkar Samagra Vangmay, running into almost 10 volumes, several thousands of pages. So very few people, even who are his alleged supporters today, would probably have the patience to go through all of that and actually dissect what the man stood for. A lot of what he said, even during his time, I think they were so far ahead of its times, and so he did not get this mass appeal that a leader needs to, even from the same side of the political spectrum. Even during his days, the Congress was always opposed to him, but even those who were the orthodoxy, they were opposed to him for the kind of things that he did about the caste eradication, about Sahebhojan, and so on, which and getting entry for all castes into temples. All of these were far-reaching changes, and his views on, say, cow worship, on numerous such contentious issues, which even to this day, I think, raise a lot of heckles among people. So in those days, 100 years back, imagining, where even the Deshastha and the Konkanastha Brahmin in Maharashtra would not sit together and eat, to have people from all castes, sit together in an inter-caste dining cafe was a very revolutionary thing, which obviously led to a lot of opposition for him then. But after that, particularly in the recent times, I think the vilification is more because of the fact that he's seen as someone who kind of propounded and gave a concrete meaning to the whole ideology of Hindutva. Though the word was in existence much before, right from the 19th century, with people like Chandranath Basu and others in Bengal, it was Savarkar in 1923 in his very that slim book Essentials of Hindutva, who gave a kind of a very workable, practical meaning of what Hindutva is. But even there, today's commentators fail to realize that Hindutva itself had numerous shades. The kind of Hindutva that Savarkar propounded, and which he carried forward through the Hindu Mahasabha, had a different shade from what the RSS, had, particularly under Guruji Golwalkar and his successors. And there was also a very radical wing also, which was led by people like Nathuram Godse and other people, Narayan Apte and so on. So they were different streams. So, but today everything is seen with a wide brush, and the particularly political commentators, politicians, and opponents of the current dispensation, political dispensation, the BJP, they feel that to undermine the current dispensation or its leader, the best way to do that is to undermine their ideological ancestor, which is Savarkar. And so unwittingly or otherwise, and without even having gone through the various contours of his life, or what the corpus of literature that he has produced, just for today's political gains and today's political discourse, there is so much of hatred that is apportioned to him, with the idea that this is somehow going to stick to the current dispensation. So he, unfortunately, I think, becomes a fall guy in this entire, tutu meme that keeps happening today between political parties. And as we know, there is no space for nuances today in public discourse. Everything is binary. There is You immediately want to slot someone into some pigeonhole and put a label on his or her head saying this one is pro, this one is anti, and so on and so forth. So in that, all these fuzzy shades in between those black and white, I think that just doesn't get the nuances are never caught in the right way. And historians in the past have allegedly done this on the calling of the previous governments and so on. And even that, Chirag, I mean, even when Savarkar died in 1966, even Indira Gandhi had very high praise for him. And if one can assume that that could be just a homily, that you say good things about someone who died, but then she also followed it up by bringing out a stamp in his honor, giving her personal money for setting up a memorial, getting a documentary film made on him. And she very clearly said that his role in the annals of the freedom movement is very unique, and his very name is a byword for patriotism, courage, and sacrifice, and all of that. So it's unfortunate that 40, 50 years later, the same Congress and the same family of the same very dynamic stateswoman like Indira Gandhi actually doesn't read what their own ancestor has said about this man. And all this opposition, I think, started more once the first NDA government came to power. And when Savarkar came right in your face, his photograph came in the Central Hall of Parliament. There was a plaque in his honor in Port Blair, which was unceremoniously removed later on when the UPA came to power. And now, after 2014, of course, he becomes the hot subject of discussion in every political rally, political manifestos. As we know, every third day there is a news debate around him and so on, which is very unfortunate. And this is all contemporary politics playing out. And in the process, I think a person, a character like him, and history itself becomes a casualty, unfortunately.
uh, from taking out from the controversy part that you said, I wanted to ask you, and I had this question very recently because I've been reading this throughout Twitter. What is the deal with Khudiram Bose and Savarkar's connection? And I read an article in the Times of India that said that Khudiram Bose's ancestors have denounced it. Even Netaji Bose's ancestors have said that. There weren't any ties with Savarkar. So what is the whole story? Because everyone on Twitter is just tagging you and asking you, "Ki, what's the deal with it?" So I want to ask this in person. What's the deal with it?
So unfortunately, these movie makers and so on who come up with these projects in India, most filmmakers, they don't take the time and the effort to actually research with the help and support of people who've spent a lot of time actually researching. Film is a completely different. Just as I cannot make a film or do it in the manner that they do, similarly, a filmmaker cannot do the research that I do or someone else like me does. So it needs to be a collaborative effort, but this was not to be so in this case. And so they go around making these ham-handed, statements for which they rightfully receive flack. And sadly, like how Savarkar becomes a fall guy, a lot of us who've actually researched also become the fall guy in this, trying to explain to all kinds of people. So, but the larger issue is, of course, there was no connection between Khudiram Bose and Savarkar, because Savarkar was then in London, but Khudiram Bose was part of Anushilan Samiti. And Anushilan Samiti, which was the revolutionary movement, the counterpart of what Abhinav Bharat, which Savarkar brothers were associated with and founded in Maharashtra, was closely working with the two organizations were closely working with each other. And in fact, Hemchandra Das Kanungo from the Anushilan Samiti had met Savarkar in London at the India House. And one of Savarkar's acolytes, though he never joined the Abhinav Bharat, which Senapati Bapat, Pandurang Mahadev Bapat, and Kanungo actually go to find out the details about a bomb manual, which could help the revolutionaries back in India to actually make bombs, because those days the British had imposed a lot of restrictions. The Rowlatt Act had come into force, and people could not have arms and ammunitions to arm yourself. So the revolutionaries needed someone from outside to smuggle in to them how to make bombs, how to send wheeled pistols and all of those, which used to be sent from Europe to them through a very difficult route. Now, in that manner, both Hemchandra and Senapati Bapat managed to go and procure a bomb manual from a Russian tailor, and then it's all in Russian, some 70 pages, which Kanungo actually takes photographs of it, and then Senapati Bapat's German girlfriend, who's in Berlin, gets it actually translated into English, and from there it is translated to multiple languages and brought back. And copies of this were sent to revolutionaries across India. So copies was found even in Nashik, when the Nashik murder case, where Anant Lakshman Kanhere, killed AMT Jackson, the collector there, and copies were found with Baba Rao Savarkar, who was Savarkar's elder brother, and he was therefore arrested and sent away to Kalapani. Similarly, copies of this was also found with the revolutionaries in Bengal of the Anushilan Samiti, and the British government, based on their own intelligence reports and investigation reports, they suggest that these were all the same set of copies which were being translated into many Indian languages and being circulated across India. And so that bomb manual was what was used in the Maniktola or Alipur bomb case, where Khudiram was finally caught. So that was by a long way. If you want to call it inspiration, then I don't know what it is, but indirectly, the work of all the revolutionaries was to do this. And unlike what we are taught in our history books, that these were all individual acts of bravery, isolated cases of foolhardy, where young men just threw some bomb on someone or killed somebody and then were hanged. What is very revealing is right from the early 20th century, these people were working in tandem. The Abhinav Bharat and the Anushilan Samiti, for example, all through the first decade of the 20th century, they were constantly meeting. They were going to Congress working sessions, whether it was in Surat, whether it was in Calcutta, different places, and attending as delegates in the morning, and by night they would meet as revolutionaries to look at the armed part of the movement. So even the so-called extremist faction within the Congress, the Lal Bal Pal trio who were there, they were also giving overt support to all these activities that were going on. So the larger picture is not what is that inspiration and so on and so forth. The larger idea that comes through is all of these people were actually working in tandem at a time when means of communication were not as advanced as today. You could not easily just form a WhatsApp group and then communicate with each other, or get on a Zoom call like this and so on. In spite of these limitations, they were managing to work together both within India, then even outside India, when Savarkar and others went to Europe, and with him all these other revolutionaries there, Shamji Krishna Varma, Madam Bhikaji Kama, Sardar Singh Rana, they were all in Paris, whereas in London you had Madan Lal Dhingra, MPT Acharya, VVS Iyer, Sikandar Hayat Khan, several others, Lala Hardayal, who later went on also to form the Gadar Party. And the Gadar Party again further enhanced this to make it intercontinental. Germany, then Canada and San Francisco, and so we are using German, meeting the German Kaiser, and actually ensuring that there is an attack on British India, both by land and by sea, to liberate it from the British. So these kind of nexus and this thing was going on, and in that way, Savarkar provided a lot of intellectual, corpus to the revolutionary movement through his works, especially the one on 1857, which he got, which he wrote using British records in the 2 years there in the British Library, using British documents, and calling it the War of Independence, the first war of Indian independence, rather than disparagingly term it as Sepoy Mutiny. And of course, so these books, his book particularly was, it became an inspiration for revolutionaries decades later. Bhagat Singh got a copy of it. published later. And Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and the founder of the INA, Indian National Army, Rash Bihari Bose, also got these translated into, from languages as, ranging from Japanese to Tamil, which were all found, copies of which were found in the INA raids later by the British. So that way, it was, one can say, that there was an inspiration. Personally, Netaji had a lot of misgivings about Savarkar, particularly when he was in India. And that was at a political level, which is perfectly fine. That way, when Netaji had lots of nasty things even to say about Gandhiji, where he called him, old piece of useless furniture and all kinds of things like that. So, and politically, they were on opposite sides of the spectrum, both in the Congress and later when Netaji formed the Forward Bloc and became a part
Yeah.
of that. So to that extent, the wordplay. So that's why these filmmakers need to understand that you can't loosely and casually use whatever words and throw it around. These are very sensitive issues. These are important characters of our history, not some, heroine whom you can make them run around.
I I guess Netaji was also, he praised Savarkar for his efforts to get youth into the army. There was also that, right?
That is suspect because
Okay.
initially I had thought so based on the this one speeches of no the work of Dhananjay Keer, where he quotes that radio broadcast of Netaji. But later in the course, when I was doing my research for the second volume, I specifically tried to look for that speech. Now there's a collected speeches of all of Netaji's broadcasts, but this particular thing is nowhere to be found. I think 25th June 1944 or something is the date of that allegedly, but there is no such record. But one can post facto kind of deduce that, because in the course of my research came across the testimonies during the INA trials of several soldiers in the Indian National Army, particularly from Maharashtra, and they were of the opinion, and in their written statements to Sardar Patel, they had mentioned that we joined the British Indian Army on the behest of Barrister Savarkar, and then defected, learned the art of warfare, and then defected to the INA. So it was very clear that so directly Netaji might not have told, but a lot of the soldiers, from their testimonies that they gave on oath in the trial, referred to this, that they had joined at the behest of this man, and so thereby we can claim, as I said, post facto, that this was how the feeder circuits were somehow provided. So, contrary to the opinion that Savarkar betrayed Netaji when he was building the INA, it was actually the other way. It had two reasons. This whole militarization drive that Hindu Mahasabha and he drove was,
Yeah.
one is, of course, because the Hindus had become so disarmed, and first of all, the British had disarmed them from arms and ammunition, and this whole fascination with ahimsa and non-violence had completely taken away all the kshatriya spirit, the warrior spirit, from their lives. And even Ambedkar in his book writes that during the World War, almost 50-55% of the British Indian Army was composed of the Muslim Pathans of the Northwest Frontier provinces. And Ambedkar himself wonders with alarm that if there is an attack from Afghanistan, will these Muslim soldiers show their support to their co-religionist, or will it be to their own country? And so it is something that the Hindus need to be alarmed about, because once the British leave, there will be civil war between the two communities, and one is completely armed, the other is chanting songs of non-violence. So you need to prepare yourself for any eventuality. So that was one reason. The other reason for the militarization was, as I said, train yourself in the art of warfare and then use that to create an insurrection in the army, or defect to the INA, which is what eventually got India her freedom. So it is a very misunderstood concept about this whole militarization drive too, which people unfortunately peddle.
I feel people look at things to a lot of black and white, and black and white essentially destroys gray in the middle. Uh, I feel that is what happened. I wanted to ask you the thing that you said about revolutionaries not being an individual acts. Do you think was it because of the later historians who wrote history wanted to show that there was only one side that was fighting for India, and there wasn't the counter narrative that was also fighting for India, but had some different visions of how we can gain our independence. Was
Correct.
it?
No, true, true, true. Because I quote this often about how after independence, when the Nehru's government wanted to write the official history of the freedom movement, and they had appointed celebrated historian Dr. R.C. Majumdar to do this task. And Dr. Majumdar was not, one of the court historians, so he had his this thing very clear that I'm going to bring out all facets of the freedom movement. So right from the 18th century, when you had tribal revolts, 18th century, early 19th century, even predating 1857, the Sannyasi rebellion in different parts of India, some of these kings and so on, in some chieftains and principalities. And of course, a big milestone was 1857, followed by other streams also. So it was not just the non-violent stream. There was a continuous unending stream of armed resistance, right, from 1857 to 1946, which was in what is unfortunately still called naval mutiny in Bombay. So that thing was never allowed to be brought out, and Majumdar also had a lot of critical assessments of Gandhi, and the numerous flip flops he did during the three major movements that he ran for independence. So he said, "I'm going to write all of this," and but that was not allowed, and so he was summarily dismissed from the committee, and there was some very pliant diplomat, Tara Chand or somebody, who was appointed as the head of this committee, making it very clear that we want an official version which only glorifies the non-violent movement. It makes India also look good that we are the only country which got freedom through non-violence and all this, and all other things need to be silenced. And why go so back in the past, to Nehru and his times? The same thing continues even till recently, where if your viewers actually Google Bhagat Singh, a revolutionary terrorist,
Yeah.
and in 2016 the reports will come up where Bhagat Singh's family objected to the then HRD minister, Smriti Irani, saying that even now a lot of these books written by people like Bipin Chandra, Mridula Mukherjee, and all these people term several of them, Jatin Das, Shurjo Sen, Bhagat Singh, as revolutionary terrorists, which is the term that the British used against them. So, using that very loaded term of terrorists, gives a very different connotation to a young mind who's reading that. When they're seeing what terrorism is in Kashmir or in other parts, and actually equating that to Bhagat Singh. So it's not Nehruvian times, even as late as 2016, and I'm really not sure if this government has changed those portions after those complaints by Bhagat Singh. But it is a public knowledge. People can actually Google this and see for themselves that Bhagat Singh's family had raised objections to how their ancestors are being termed. So there was certainly a very, very conscious attempt to mention it. I'm not saying these are not mentioned; they are mentioned in passing. It's almost like a footnote in history. But the importance and the amount of sacrifice, the amount of trouble these people took, be it in Kalapani, be it across continents, doing things like this Gadar movement, all these things have not come out. They may not have succeeded. That doesn't mean they don't deserve a place in the annals. That way, most of the non-violent movements also did not succeed. So, but still, they are glorified, and we talk ad nauseum about them. So, similarly, all the contributions and the bravery, the sacrifice, I think putting that in a right perspective. When we talk of this, and I think that is very important. And through you and young people like you, it is very important to put this in context. That if you're talking about the armed revolution, that doesn't mean you start disparaging the non-violent movement or calling Gandhi names and this and that. That had its own, importance. So till the time Gandhi arrived on scene, 1915, Congress was just a group of some elite people, meeting here and there, all just looking for some concessions and so on. Right? They were really not talking so much about freedom. Gandhiji also did not really think of freedom. All through, it was only dominion status that he kept, asking for. But under him, it became a mass movement. It went to every nook and corner of India. he ignited that flame of nationalism and the desire itself to get freedom. So the two things, I would see them as being complementary. So and by 1942, the Quit India movement had failed miserably because it had no leadership, it had no plan of action from Gandhi and the Congress. But it became a very, very violent movement because of all the underground revolutionaries, the mercenaries in the army, and so many others. And so by then, the feeling of nationalism had really peaked so much that it burst forth. That would not have been possible 20 years before if these national, mass movements had not been, done by him. So both have its place. Of course, if one is to very, very objectively assess, had Gandhi not gone on the numerous flip flops that he did during the movements he launched, had he had a clearer, vision as to what he was seeking, at the end of these movements, maybe we might have won freedom earlier. That is anybody's guess. We really cannot conjecture that whether freedom, especially 19 after 1945 and the Second World War, many countries got freedom because Britain, though had won the war, it had been weakened. Its economy had been weakened. Its power was weakened, and so many other countries got freedom. So this conjecture we can do, maybe they could have got earlier or whatever. But I think both movements had its role. And today, when we are trying to correct that tide of history, one should not descend to the same mistake that was done in the past. Downplay or degrade one stream just to highlight another stream. Both the streams should be presented in all its this thing, the positives, the failures. The revolutionary movement also had a lot of failures. Similarly, the non-violent struggle also had a lot of failures. So 75 years after independence, and for such a young nation like ours, where most of the demographic of the country is probably of your age and probably of people like you who are listening to this podcast, I think they should be a little unemotional and look at it in a very logical, balanced, sensible manner, assess for themselves who did what was the outcome, cause and effect. I think today's generation is a lot smarter and they can make their own conclusions, and they don't need some geriatric historians to sit and feed that judgment into their heads that this is how it is and you need to mug it up and vomit it in exams to to get your marks.
Thank you so much for the compliments.
So I again want to ask you about, is it because you said the Congress was built of elites, that's the reason they were afraid of violence, or they were afraid of a bit of extremism? It's because you often find that elite people aren't essentially the ones going in the streets and raising arms. It's usually the masses that raises the arms. So do you think Congress somewhere didn't had the connect with the masses? Is it something like
I
that?
wouldn't think so because they were, Lal Bal Pal, who were in the Congress, they also came from very, elite families only. Even later on, people like Sachindranath Sanyal or even Savarkar, who came from a zamindar background, they were also that way elite only. I
Oh,
think they were a group in different groups within the Congress, and the Congress really uh, we first of all today we equate today's Congress the Indian National Congress or whatever it is called, to what the party which fought for freedom, which is completely wrong.
that would be a big joke. Please, we shouldn't do that.
Because the Congress at that time was like an umbrella organization. It was a pan India organization for dialogue and discussion, and it was founded by the British, right? The founding president was A.O. Hume, who was a British officer. The idea was to keep Indians in engagement. It was what was Congress was famously called as a safety valve, so that the repeat of 1857 and the carnages that happened there does not happen. So keep them in engagement. Some small things, they want some increase in the number of seats in some judiciary, in some assembly, give it to them. If it is nothing, some very, very minor appeasement, if you can do and keep them happy and peaceful, then they will not do a bagawat against you. So that was the whole reason I mean, that was the whole objective of how the early decades of the Congress was. And that is where I said once Gandhi came into the picture, he enlarged the scope of that to become a mass movement. He chose the whole idea of non-violence, which many people in the Congress itself did not agree. I mean, including Motilal Nehru himself, who broke away from him, formed the Swaraj Party. And when he started the Khilafat and the non-cooperation movement, several people, including Annie Besant and Lala Lajpat Rai, all these people were, opposed to that. So there were different streams within that. So of which, so a lot of elite people. So that way, the revolutionaries were supported by several elites, particularly the financial part of it, including Maharajas of princely states. We forget to kind of acknowledge their contribution to indirectly finance. Where would these people get the funds from? So people like Sayaji Rao Gaikwad from Baroda, or even the Scindia in Gwalior. So all of these people, the Maharaja of Nepal, so many of them were also giving money to these people to carry on these activities. And they had their own angst. The British had taken away their kingdoms and so on. They had a resident in court. They had no independence to take decisions. So they thought, funding these radical elements, as they saw, would help, shake up the government, and the British will give concessions. So they all had their own respective agendas, but it was a larger thing of many people.
Sir, I wanted to ask this. This might sound very controversial, but sir, do you think India would have been one unified nation if the British would have not foot on the Indian continent? Like, do you think India would have been this united?
Politically very difficult. I think it's quite because we were divided into numerous provinces and states even in the 18th century, fighting so much amongst ourselves. If you see the history of the entire 18th century, when the European power was at its peak here, I mean, right from the south to the east to every part of India, you had in the south, you had the Carnatic Wars, the Wars of Succession for the possession of the Nizam of Hyderabad, then the Nawab of Arcot in Mysore, in and the Marathas meddling in the whole issue. So it was a very, very confused era politically. If we say, were we always a nation civilizationally and culturally? That we have always been. But political borders and boundaries, that I think would have been very different if the British had not been there. And I know the answer is also as controversial as your question, but it is a truth that one needs to, face. Because recently I was having a discussion with someone, and he was mentioning to me that, and it kind of resonated in my mind too, that we, the whole of South India would have turned into a pan-Islamic, grouping, actually, but for the British, because the Marathas, honestly speaking, they kept raiding Mysore, they kept coming here and doing all this, but they never made it a part of their kingdom. They were only going there, collecting their Chaut and Sardesh Mukhi, going back, almost like raiders. But then in Mysore, you had forces like Hyder Ali, and later on a very bigoted son of his, Tipu Sultan, who came in. Now he had pan-Islamic ambitions, including writing letters to the Caliph for his own supremacy, or legitimizing his position. He was requesting Zaman Shah of Afghanistan to invade India and to Islamize India. So Mysore region was under threat that way from a pan-Islamist this thing, and a lot of today's Kerala had already been occupied by Tipu Sultan after defeating the Nayars there and committing atrocities. So Kerala would also have become part of that whole Islamic state. What is Tamil Nadu? The Carnatic region was under the Nawab of Arcot, obviously. So that also a Muslim presidency, and large part of central and Andhra and all this area was under the Nizam, which again was a Muslim principality. So imagine the whole of South India would have actually, and the only people who defeated each of them, the British defeated Tipu in the four Anglo-Mysore wars that they did, and killed him in the fourth. Kerala was also thereby rescued. The Travancore rulers were given the freedom. There was a Hindu dynasty of the Vodiyars established in Mysore. Arcot Nawab was kept under check. Nizam became a puppet. So they were given ceremonial powers to do what they want, but they couldn't flex their muscles beyond a point. So politically, that way, I think it was that. But of course, in the process, it was not a positive. There were positive effects. The negative effects were, of course, the imposition of their own belief systems, their own faith, and the one step ahead that they went in colonization compared to the Islamic invaders of colonizing us completely in terms of our culture, subjugating our learning systems, imposing English everywhere, and the economic exploitation, which of course was humongous. Our GDP shrunk from 25% to less than 4% by the time the British left us. So those negative side effects, of course, were there. But politically, yes, one should be honest enough to give the devil its due where it is required.
So there
So
was
there was
this
this
Marathi
Marathi
writer in
writer in
Maharashtra,
Maharashtra, a
very
very
famous
famous
writer
writer
called
called
Pula
Pula
Deshpande.
Deshpande.
He is
He
a
is a
very
very
famous
famous
comedic
comedic
writer. He
writer. He
was.
was.
So
So
he
he
wrote this
wrote this
very
very
interesting
interesting
piece where
piece
he
where he
said,
said that,
in
in
Marathi it
Marathi it
sounded like
sounded
ki
like
only
only
British
British
should
should
rule.
rule.
And
And
he
he
made a
made a
funny
funny
joke on
joke on
Gandhi there
Gandhi
where
there
he
where he
said
said
he
he
didn't have
didn't have
enough
enough
money to
money
buy
to
a
buy a
new
new
coat,
coat,
so he
so he
remained
remained
naked,
naked,
and
and
that
that
turned him
turned him
into a
into a
Mahatma.
Mahatma.
So in
So in
Marathi it
Marathi it
sounds
sounds
very
very
good. It
good. It
says
says
ki
ki
नवा
नवा
कोट
कोट
शिवायला
शिवायला
नव्हता
नव्हता
दमडा,
दमडा,
राहिला
राहिला
उघडा
उघडा
आणि
आणि
झाला
झाला
महात्मा.
महात्मा.
So,
So,
so I
so I
feel
feel
he
he
also
also
knew
knew
like
like
what he was
what he was
trying to
trying
say
to
is
say is
ki we
कि
were
we were
very
very
different,
different,
and
and
that's
that's
probably the
probably the
reason
reason
why
why
we
we
weren't
weren't
that
that
much
much
into
into
invading
invading
because
because
everyone was
everyone was
trying to
trying to
protect
protect
what was
what was
their
their
own
own
little
little
kingdom that
kingdom
was
that was
happening in
happening in
India.
India.
So
So
I
I
wanted to
wanted to
ask you,
ask you,
if you
if
were
you were
given
given
100
100
pages to
pages to
write
write
India's
India's
history,
history,
let's just
let's
say
just say
from the
from the
dawn of
dawn of
India,
India,
I would fail
how
miserably.
that's the title of your next book. That should be your next book. Uh, so how would you allocate those 100 pages?
100 pages.
yeah.
That's all. Okay. Okay. That's a very I think it would be a mix of political history, especially for if it's for students and for young people. We focus only on political history, dynasties. There also the one needs to make it inclusive, give a mention of as many parts of India, as many important regions and political dynasties across India. That forms 25%, 30% of the narrative, a kind of a flow. But I think, especially in growing up years, the role of history should be different, where it also gives you a very critical assessment of from the dawn of India, as you mentioned, till independence or whatever. What were the contributions of India and Indians to various fields? What are the reasons for which we can be genuinely proud of our ancestors and their achievements? That forms another important segment. The cultural history, which is so important. Who are the people in different parts of India, outside royal families and kings and queens? What were they? What were different cultures? What were the cultural interfaces? We are a civilizational nation. We are not just a political nation whose political boundaries keep changing every few years, if at all. I mean, 10 years ago, or when was it, 15 years ago, Andhra Pradesh was united. Today we have two, Telangana and Andhra. So political boundaries can keep changing, but culturally and civilizationally it is one. So what aspects of that culture and civilization, that history needs to come along with the politics. And importantly, I think 10-15% is also needed, not just glorification that we were amazing, we did this, that. So while we have all those contributions in various fields, it could be the sciences, it could be mathematics, medicine, wellness, metallurgy, alchemy, yoga, Ayurveda, whatever it is, all of that. But also, what were our shortcomings? Why is it that despite being such an advanced civilization, why is it we did not manage to maintain our independence? Because history is not just a tool to glorify yourself. It is a mirror in which you can identify yourself as a civilization, as a people, gives you a sense of identity. And also I think it's a good lighthouse to tell you that these are the mistakes that you should not commit in the future, so that, as they say, history keeps repeating itself only because no one was hearing it the first time. So so you ensure that the young people somehow can link that to today's India and say these kind of mistakes which our forefathers did, we will not commit. So I think in these 100 pages, if that's a textbook that is to be written, I would apportion it that way. Unfortunately, what we do is probably 60% we study only about Delhi and its sultanates and Mughals and this and that, and all the rest of India is summarized in a little bit. And of course, the British Empire, another 30%, probably 10% is left to all the other Bichara parts of India to find utterance, which I think needs to be balanced. It needs to be inclusive and a good proportion of political history, cultural history, achievements, and failures. All of this will give us a very rounded perspective of what our past is.
So that, guys, was the outline of Dr. Sampath's next book. So you heard it here first. So coming back to the freedom struggle again, what do you think was Gandhi's biggest mistake? Was it non-violence?
uh, yes and no. To a large extent, yes, because no, because as I said, it kind of galvanized people. It made it simpler. I mean, everyone in every household would not probably want to take up arms, and it's a risky, dangerous game to play, right? So not everyone is inclined to do that sort of a thing for the freedom. That's why very handful of people joined the revolutionary movement. But you still had the angst that I want to do something for my country. So parallel, if I draw, I mean, this when this Anna Hazare movement happened, a lot of middle class Indians who were frustrated with the government, the corruption, the system, the collapse, the decay in the system, they just went and joined that movement, because all of us do not have the wherewithal to enter electoral politics, put in all the money, muscle power, fight, and this and that. But our conscience is hurting somewhere. We have to do something. We can't see our country going down this ruined path. So some fellow comes and shows a beacon of hope. You said, chalo, he's my leader and he's a saintly figure. It's exactly like what Anna Hazare did. We'll just follow him. I don't think any of them who joined those, Anna movement those times ever thought that this is to make it a political party or it is to make it those type of things. It was just that desh ke liye kuch karna hai, let us do something. There, all symbolisms, flag is being, so on every day. There's Vande Mataram singing. So it charges that atmosphere. So I think Gandhi managed to understand that pulse. So, and that's how he widened the net across India and brought Aam Aadmis into the fold. But that was not enough. Just having the movement was not enough. What was his logic of what was the outcome, the end result that he had to achieve out of it? I've mentioned this in other places too, that there were three major movements that he launched. Right, one was the first one was the non-cooperation and the Khilafat movement, which ended in disaster, because the Khilafat movement was a very communal and a dangerous movement, and he mobilized people on religious passions, and so that had its own side effects of Muslim separatism, which had already started gaining ground in India. So that led to another trouble of eventually the country being partitioned on religious lines. So that, and then just on the flimsy this thing of violence in Chauri Chaura, the small village somewhere in UP where some people went and burnt a police station, the entire movement was pulled back, which had gone to its peak. So he needed a face saver at that time, and Chauri Chaura came as a very important face saver. So the first movement was a not a great success. The second one was, you had the Bardoli Satyagraha, which Patel led. Then you had the Dandi March, which was symbolic. It didn't really result in any, lessening of taxes or removing of taxes on salt, but it was symbolic act of protest. And after, and this came immediately in the aftermath of the British, the Indians were protesting against the Simon Commission, that we want Indians to be part of group which is going to form our own constitution. And that's what Simon had come to do at the behest of the British government in England. So these were protesting against that, and Gandhi refused to participate in the entire constitution process or go to the roundtable conferences. Instead, launched this movement, the civil disobedience movement, which was extremely potent. And it was only in 1929-30 when the Congress too gave the Purna Swaraj call, because till then they were only talking of dominion status, not complete independence. Whereas the revolutionaries, right from the early 20th century, they were talking of complete freedom. But even there, Gandhi took back all that he had achieved in 1930. He had a closed door meeting with the Viceroy, Lord Irwin, and the Gandhi Irwin Pact, where everything that they had accepted, including Purna Swaraj, including not going to round table, everything was put on the back burner. And something that even Nehru writes in his memoirs as to how it was so, he could not sleep for 2 days because he felt, is this what thousands of people sacrificed, that one day you go and have tea with the viceroy and you give back everything that you have achieved. And then he goes to the second roundtable conference, and Subhash Chandra Bose also, criticizes him immensely there, saying as the sole representative, well, he could have gone with 15 others, he went alone, and he was not a politician, hardened politician who could negotiate, hard core, and sitting with all those people there. You saintliness has its limitations. So there, that was also an utter failure. And the third movement was, as we said, the Quit India movement, which incidentally the Congress completely disassociated itself from, saying it was a very bloody and a violent movement. Even in British records, it's only called as August disturbances. It was launched in August 1942, more in the aftermath of the failure of the Cripps Commission, when Gandhi was being increasingly sidelined, and Nehru and Maulana Azad had almost signed a pact with Stafford Cripps, and Nehru was to become the first defense minister of India. But the impact of that, which Savarkar and the Mahasabha and all others opposed, was that every province of India could accede to either India or to the new formation of Pakistan. So that would actually mean that India would be completely dismembered. So that is why they opposed it. But Nehru and Azad and others, they were okay to go ahead with that. Gandhi was also opposed to it. And so to counter this and to assert his own position, he launched the Quit India movement. But within 2-3 days of it being launched, or within a week or so, the entire top brass of the Congress, including Gandhi himself, being pushed away to Aga Khan Palace and all others put in jail. The movement had no leadership. The movement had no plan of action. Do or die did not meant many things to many people. Do means, does it mean violent do, or is it non-violent do? What is it? And what are you asking the British for? Are you asking them to leave? So he used to say Quit India, and Savarkar used to say this is going to become Split India, because that is what it's going to lead eventually to, and that's what happened. And as I said, the Congress disassociated itself from this movement, and in 1944, when he got released from Aga Khan Palace, Gandhi literally, says sorry for this movement. It has caused so much violence, and from now on, I'm not going to launch any more civil disobedience movement. We will very dutifully participate in the war efforts of the British. The World War was still raging on then. So, all this dilly dallying, flip flops, going back and forth, this, I think, did not give a cogent, while, you had built the masses, you had built that sense, but once you build the masses, you need to give them a sense of direction for the water to flow. If you yourself don't know what you're asking for from the opponent, the poor people who are following you, who are sacrificing so much, all the satyagrahis who lost their lives and properties and all of that, jailed for several years, all that sacrifice just feels wasted, because the person who's helping that doesn't have a clear vision as to what you seek out of this whole movement. So I think that was a very important failure, and the manner in which he managed to capture the Congress, which many people, including Subhash Bose and Ambedkar, criticized, that it was a dictatorship almost, that it's my way or the highway. Anybody who opposes this, then I'm going to go on a fast unto death. And so there is no space for a democratic dissent, where you can have differing viewpoints, and so on. So it becomes a one man party. run at his whims and fancies, which is what I think was some of the failures of the man and his movements.
So I wanted to ask you, if let's just say there was only one movement throughout India. Let's just say there was either only Gandhi or either only revolutionaries. How do you think the country would have looked like? Would it have been the same time it would have been independent? And more than independence, what would the future of the country look like?
So that's what, as I said, when we would get independence, that's anybody's guess.
Yes.
Even during the First World War, so if the Gatherites had actually succeeded and Germany had managed to invade, they were actually attacks even on navy stations of the British, even in Port Blair at the cellular jail, then in the port of Madras, then Kakinada, Vishakhapatnam, all these places along the eastern coast. Ships came all the way through the Arabian Sea, Indian Ocean, and then attacked those. And from the land route, it was through Afghanistan where they wanted to attack. So if that had succeeded, maybe in 1912, 1914, we might have become independent. But would we have become a German colony? We probably would have. Why would the Germans just do all this just for the love of us or whatever? So they would have their own demands. What that could have led to, one doesn't know. But at least our immediate enemy, the British, we would have got rid of. But if we had followed, we eventually followed only the non-violent movement, and that is why the country became what it became. We eulogize that so much. Thankfully, I mean, the new government, and no sane new government can do that. I mean, follow Gandhi's wishes that army should be disbanded. We are now a free nation. So luckily we had an army, but we know what the quality of that army was exposed in the 1962 war, where we were wholly and squarely defeated by China. So those things happened because of eulogizing and following this. Maybe if we were in the revolutionary side, maybe we would have been a little more militarily, strong and aggressive, and been a little more, especially in dealing with things like separatism, partition, and the problems that we had on both sides with the East and West Pakistan created on both sides. I think the approach to that would have been very different than what we took eventually.
But do you think we would have a stable government? Like, there's this very famous saying that revolutionaries are great lovers but not great husbands. Uh, so, do you think the government would have been stable, or would it have ended into something like Vietnam, where both started fighting with each other for power?
Possible, because unless they were guided by some common purpose and goal, or it became a unitary, leadership. Under Nehru, eventually we became a what today is called a elected autocracy and all of that. There was just one man's writ which ran even within the Congress, especially after in the 1950s, with Nehru being the be all and end all of everything, right? And so similarly, there was a military dictator or someone who was a single this thing. But I'm glad that that did not happen that way. Maybe our democracy would have been endangered. Maybe we would have been in the same position as what Pakistan is today, where the army is more powerful than the democratic government. But not necessary that all the revolutionaries always had a dictatorial or a violent mode of leadership only, because right from the HRA, the HSRA, and even the Hindu Mahasabha, all of them had an idea. Why so late? Even earlier, Savarkar himself, when he spoke of a republic, what would India look like after freedom? In the early 1900s itself, they had conceptualized. It was a democratic thing based on constitution, based on where all arms, executive, judiciary, legislature, army, all of that had equal, very precise defined roles. No one was going to encroach on another's territory. So I think they would have also not descended into the kind of military anarchy which probably what our neighbors face, but it would have been a much more, I think, stronger, militarily stronger nation, at least if some of those people had been in power. If Bhagat Singh was our first prime minister or something like that.
Bhagat Singh had written somewhere that the day we get independence, what I would like to do is open a good bottle of wine, go watch a good movie, and then you know, yeah. So we don't know. I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on G20? Like India being at the presidency, it happening in Kashmir. Any thoughts from an historian who has looked at India through several lenses and now looking at India at hosting a big summit where it has 85% of the global GDP. What do you think about it?
No, true. I mean, G20 is one manifestation, but alongside, I mean, we've from being, at such dire straits in 1947, and even in before to 2014 to be in the fragile five economically and so on, today to becoming the fastest growing economy in India, to even overtaking our colonial masters and becoming the fifth largest economy. And if the IMF projections are to be believed, I think by 2030 or so, we'll be the third largest after China, US, and then it will be India. So the growing power of this country, we're already, I mean, the one thing we're always good at is increasing our population. So there we have, of course, overtaken the whole world and become number one. So the world can no longer afford to ignore India's viewpoint. And the fact that we are militarily strong, we've had our nuclear arsenals too, we are economically strong. I think military and economic might make people across the world sit up and take notice. Then your civilizational strength also will not be taken for granted. uh, China is an example. They can do anything and get away. There can even be allegations and suspicions of them unleashing this horrid virus across the world, but still no one takes them to task because of those two reasons. India should not become an irresponsible country like that on the might of its, which it will not, because civilizationally we have different ethos. But the fact that all these different, whether it's a quad, whether it is a G20, whatever else, I mean, they may be symbolic and ceremonial type of things, but the very fact that India is getting a place at the high table is very, very significant. And it makes bodies like the United Nations seem so redundant then, when a country which represents such a vast population of the globe that is not on the permanent seat in the security council, and you have other people vetoing it. So that the very clamor to enlarge that and make India this sobering voice, where even between Russia and Ukraine, the kind of approach we took to calibrate our response without taking sides overtly, all of this goes in our favor in the manner in which we balance the very, very tenuous geopolitics that we live in.
Coming back to Hindutva, do you think Savarkar would have been proud of what currently is being, I won't say peddled, but currently is named as Hindutva? Do you think he would have been a what can I say in pro of this, or he would have had some different thoughts about it?
That's a good question. So I don't even know what all in today's world, in India particularly, is peddled in the name of Hindutva. Anybody, going and thrashing someone up, killing, is that Hindutva? I don't know. Anybody can say anything, but yeah, many things which he might have been proud of is the fact that we are standing up to everything. I mean, bullying also, like we didn't we had our neighbor coming all the way to Mumbai and causing in the 2008 26/11, and we didn't have any response other than stupidly sending some dossiers which they did not bother to acknowledge at all. A country of our stature and size, I think, deserves to do much more. But especially what we did in Balakot after that and after that, Pakistan has been, of course, has its own internal problems, but it's relatively shut its mouth after that, saying, we can't take India for granted now. So those type of things, he would always say, na, Shatruncha Shibirat, you enter the enemy's camp and ghar mein ghus ke unko maro. So those type of proactive, belligerent steps we take to safeguard our own national security, our nation first kind of a national security and a foreign policy, that I think he would have been proud of. But all these other things, I don't know. I mean, he would have been completely the if 370 removal of Article 370 and the complete unification of Jammu and Kashmir, which has always been a very important ideological standpoint for all of Hindutva votaries, whether it was Savarkar or Shama Prasad Mukherjee, who died for that cause in Kashmir. That is a great thing to be achieved. Some amount of social equality in terms of removing things like triple talaq and all of that would come under that larger rubric of Hindutva. But other than that, I mean, that's what, as I said, it's such a vast brush to paint with. Some hoodlums will go and create, throw stones in some place, and they are also called Hindutva activists. Everybody, so one doesn't know. There is no clear policy as to what is Hindutva in 2023. 100 years after Savarkar propounded it in 1923, and in 2 more years, it will be 100 years of the RSS being established. Today, do all these ideologues who belong to these organizations, do they have a cogent view of what is Hindutva for the 21st century, and what is it for the future, for the next 100 years or the next 50 years? What are the main issues? What are the main priorities? I'm not sure if there is that clarity or vision for the future. So when that is not there, one doesn't know which aspects of Hindutva he would have approved of or not approved of, because it's very difficult to say, because there's no clarity on the term itself. When I remember very unfortunately, including someone as senior as Mr. Jaswant Singh, who held such high positions in the Vajpayee government, when his book on Jinnah had come out and there was a lot of controversy around it, many times he was asked about Hindutva, and he said, being though I'm in the BJP, I have no clue what this term means. So there is no clarity. So it is a hold all bucket where you can put anything and say this is also Hindutva. So giving hate speech, is it Hindutva? Is it? But doing legitimate, protest or issues like what is even in the UK, the sexual grooming, what is called here as love jihad, are they important issues? Is the demographic change, is forcible conversion, are they important issues? Yes, of course they are. So those things need to be a proper, clear vision. Where do we stand on these important items? That is important. And though we have a Hindutva government in place, Hindu temples are still not freed from government control. So where does Hindutva philosophy stand on all these internal as well as external issues? I think there is a need for a lot of ideologues on the Hindutva side to sit and deliberate and brainstorm to say what are our key action items. Ram Mandir is done, 370 is done, triple talaq is done. All those things are tick marked. What now for the future? And what is it that different people who are involved in this need to work for the future?
Sir, do you think how, like, I just wanted to ask you because you've been studying a lot of civilizations. Is it economics first and then social identity, or is it social identity first and then economics? How does a country work? Economics.
Always. Money, as I said, money and military might talk the most. All are that's why culture, etc., comes in soft power. So soft comes only first. You need to have your hard power, and only then people will take you seriously. uh, Soft power is important, but you can't win everything through that, unfortunate as it is. But we have the best of that also. So once we build on the hard exterior, then I think our softer infrastructure is what is going to help us immensely.
That makes very much sense. So now we are in, like, towards the end of the podcast. So I wanted to ask you a few questions that my friends asked because I asked them, do you guys have any questions? So the first question, which is very very important, is how much did you score in your 10th in history?
Oh God, actually quite bad. Social science studies itself was quite bad. I think something like 84 or 87 or something like that. It was among my lower numbers, and that was CBSE.
That's still good, sir.
No, considering all the other subjects were above 90, and
Oh,
only social science was the only unfortunate thing where I scored under 90. And as I keep saying in so many places, social studies, particularly history class, always meant kneeling down outside, getting the worst of punishments from the teacher. I remember once my history teacher, I think I'd not done the map work or something right, and she'd taken two scales and beaten so hard on my palm that the scale broke and the splinter had gone inside, and the whole, this palm had swollen up and bled. And the next day my mother had to go to the school and literally, have a huge fight with the administration, saying, I mean, how does it matter if my son doesn't know history? You can't literally, break his hand this way. So, so yeah, I don't think for students, my growing up years in history would be any inspiration at all.
Did you send her two copies of the book? Just a signed copy. Or the worst thing could be you could have not signed it, and when she calls you, you could have been like, "No, I still have the splinter in my hand, so I can't say."
I keep still getting, a lot of messages from her. I don't think she lives in India now, but she says, "Oh, I'm so proud of you," and so on and so forth. And yeah, we've let history be forgotten, our history be forgotten.
That's such an irony when it's coming from a history teacher. The second question, which one of my friend had, which I felt was very interesting, was during the book, the Savarkar book. Did you find something that was very interesting, but you didn't include it in the book for some or the other reason? Was there something like that?
So I think I've tried. That's why it's become so voluminous. I would have wanted it to be in 3 volumes. My publishers, Penguin, said you better limit it to two. So yeah, I think a lot of it was included. Some parts, yeah, like the 1948 anti-Brahmin riots in Maharashtra. There were many people who gave me a lot of personal anecdotes when I sourced it, largely crowdsourced all the data. Some people gave me such, heartbreaking stuff, but when I asked because finally the ethics of research is you take permission, especially of the person being interviewed, can we use this for publication purpose? Many of them, so if you see the appendix to the second volume, most of those are under anonymous views. Some of them refused. They said, we just shared it with you, but we will not give you permission to publish those stuff. And a lot of people fell under that category. You live in Maharashtra, you would know best. You know how people who led mobs during those times, at least at that time, they were in power in Maharashtra, or those groups of parties and the descendants and so on. I will not even name who they are. And many of them felt that, we've moved on, we've created better lives for ourselves. We don't want to bring disaster on ourselves back after so many years. So and that hardly 3 4 people had the courage, and I don't blame anybody else, had this one conviction to say you can put it with my name. Rest of it were anonymous, but several others also said this is only for your personal information and not for being printed anywhere. So to that extent, I think it also opened my eyes to the fact that after so many years it is still, people have that fear and fright, which is a very sad thing, considering, you would have expected that people might have moved on. But the very fact that justice was denied, no FIRs lodged, no kind of retribution, nothing, even talking about it after so many 2 generations having been passed is also so difficult, says a lot. And if we had learned from that history of 1948, 1984 might not have happened. Just a very perversely, it's just a change of the digits, 48 to 84. The anti-Sikh riots again, where because somebody belonging to a community was killed a leader, you go against the entire group. So if stringent laws had been brought up in 48, or all the perpetrators were properly booked, maybe that thing would not have repeated. So yeah, that was perhaps the only thing. But as far as Savarkar is concerned, almost each and every little detail that I had of him, good, bad, ugly, I think I put everything in.
Let's end this conversation on a very gossipy topic. That's the when the book was launched, did you get any, like, you did get a lot of flack from the left? But what were the some of the famous flags that you remember? And if you can name them, definitely name them. And I a part question which is a bit serious. What was the whole deal about you plagiarizing someone's work? What was that about? And how much? I just I want the viewers to know how big of this, how big of an allegation plagiarism is for a writer. So yeah,
So the first part was, yeah, the first volume when it came out, nobody took much note of it. I think they said, okay, yet another book, it's okay. But I think the second volume, once that came out, because
the
that
reason
goes
being,
deeper into a lot of the
why
politics
weren't
of,
they?
which is more relevant to today's times. That is when the floodgates were opened, and it happened in a pattern. It didn't happen overnight. This whole issue that you mentioned, that was the culmination of a long drawn 7-8 months of relentless targeting. And around that same time, I'd also appeared in one of those media conclaves with Dr. Tharoor, and so that also created its own heartburns among, because I everywhere talk openly about what the leftists have, historians particularly, have done to distort this country's history, and I continue to do that forever. So that obviously, that's the last bastion they hold, and if someone is trying to attack the last bastion, there will be a pushback. But I didn't know it is going to be that virulent. So initially, there were all kinds of random journalists and this and that who put on Twitter, take screenshots, out of context. They will quote something. There was something about Rajaji. This whole controversy about Chitragupta and that life of barrister Savarkar, that he himself wrote it. So somewhere there was I wouldn't want to get, it's a long story in itself, whether Rajaji was the one who wrote that book or whether it was VBS Iyer and all that. So because that book itself was published in Madras in 1926. So about that, some person created one huge this thing. And those days, so like this, they used to bring up small issues out of nowhere and keep trying to discredit me, particularly on social media. And maybe those were still earlier days. Today I don't even care, but those days I felt the need to also put things in perspective for the larger this thing. So I would respond with long threads giving all sources, information, this, that, rebutting all of this, and that would silence people for a while. And then I knew this thing would come up. Then I also, some out of job historians from literally from the party like CPI-ML. Imagine CPI-ML, having some activist who's supposedly some historian somewhere in some university, then writing in the CPI-ML magazine some review, and that is held up as the best, takedown or whatever. This is okay. I mean, reviews, once you put your book out in public domain, I think you should be prepared for scrutiny, and a reviewer has his or her right. So I have no problem if someone likes it. For every one person who disliked it, there were 10 others who liked it. So it's a free game. You can't get sensitive about that. If someone is asking for doubts and questions and discrediting you on social media, that then I thought it's important to allow that dialogue to happen. But obviously no one was interested in dialogue. It was only accusation to somehow discredit. And at that time I also got to know that a lot of campaigns, activities were going on not only within the country, but it was an international this one, with a lot of transfer of money also happening. There were some moles insiders who told us these things. It was to start with vandalizing our Wikipedia pages. People like Sanjeev Sanyal and me, and I think even Anand Ranganathan's Wikipedia page itself was pulled down. All this was going on and we all knew about it, and the idea was to churn out articles against us. There were articles written against Sanjeev in the usual, the Wire, the Scroll, the this and the that, the usual suspects. Similarly against me, so that you build an online database, so that the minute someone Googles your name, the first things are articles that discredit you, which can also be used as links for vandalizing your Wikipedia page, saying he's XYZ, he's useless, and the link to that is a article which they only have written. So they
Agreed.
work like this in a cartel, which also we were trying to counter in our own way. But I think the worst part of it, and which is why I had to take it to its extreme position of actually taking the matter to court, was this whole plagiarism issue, which was completely blown out of proportion. And I can't speak much about it because the matter is still sub judice in the courts. But it is a very, very important. When all of this failed, that was the Brahmastra that was fired by them against me, and so I had to counter it with my own Brahmastra, because it's a very serious matter when it comes to academic circles. That this particular issue is not taken seriously, so then your entire corpus of work can be discredited. It's literally like a assassination attempt on your entire body of work and the hard work of several. I've been an author for 15, 16 years now. It is like assassination attempt on all of that, and it has the potential. And there were, I know, several eminent historians in this country who are actually making threat calls to my publishers, Penguin, to kind of get the book, scrap the books, and so on. There were calls even made to my PhD supervisor in Australia, far away from all this madness in India, saying we want copies of his PhD thesis. So it was literally a witch hunt which was going on. And it was in those dire straits when, the pani sar ke upar nikal chuka hai, that is when you decide that, hey, if you just sit quiet now, you're going to be killed. So, and this was a very, very, specious argument, because those were all excerpts from a speech that I gave, which was transcribed by someone in a manner, and that is what was held out as being copied and so on. That's what, as I said, I can't get into the merits of the case itself, but that is why we thought it's high time we take them to task. And so it this had to be done, including, I mean, all these allegations were sent to the Royal Historical Society. And I think that was again a big heartburn, that how is it that this guy gets a entry into some of the fortresses we hold. Very few Indians are there as a part of the Royal Historical Society. So here, if somebody or if somebody says good things about me, they can say, oh, it's the BJP, the Sangh, which is patronizing him. Now, the Royal Historical Society of the UK is not a Sangh body. They have a set of intelligent people who evaluate your contribution, your work, and you're made a fellow accordingly. There are no monetary benefits out of it. It's just that it's a
They would also go out to cancel them. They would be like, no, they are misogynist.
So cancel culture, exactly. Deplatforming, canceling, threats. There are a bunch of bullies. Just as in colleges, you would have these bullies who would go around doing what they do with other young people they don't like. That's what these people largely are. Go and write letters to that Royal Historical Society, to your publisher, to your PhD supervisor who's awarded the PhD to me 6 years ago. I mean, what is it? What is the reason to drag them into this entire debate? So all these things done with a very, very ulterior mind. You can imagine the amount of heartburn that the work would have caused, because especially leftists, if a particular work doesn't threaten them, they ignore it. They kill you by silence. So only when something really shatters the earth beneath their feet, they do this extreme thing. At any point, this guy has to be killed and discredited so much that anything in future that he might say should not have any value. But luckily, I think, touchwood, things went in favor. And after that, there have been so many books, so many talks, so many things, and none of them took any cognizance. Penguin did not bother. The Royal Historical Society didn't bother. My University of Queensland in Australia, which granted me the PhD after 5 years of slogging there, that did not bother. My readers didn't bother. Podcasters like you don't bother. If they get some perverse pleasure by vandalizing Wikipedia and writing some silly articles in some wire and scroll which nobody reads, good for them. If that gives them happiness to sleep at night in peace, and if I'm living so much rent free in their heads, I would take that as a compliment. I should start probably charging some rent for so much of their mind space.
So you're copywriting their mind. So there's this very interesting thing that says ki the right kills you with sticks and the left kills you with words. So that's exactly what this is, I feel.
So that is the whole problem. So we have now a group of people whom I myself don't consider myself right wing and this wing and that wing.
Yeah.
We are just the truth wing. So there are a lot of us who come up outside the system. We do not belong to the government, to some party, to some organization, university setup, nothing. Whether people like J. Sai Deepak or Sanjeev Sanyal, Anand Ranganathan, Professor Meenakshi Jain, of course, has been there for so long. And people like her, Rajiv Malhotra, others have been doing pioneering work from before. But there's several others who are now talking openly, who can also kill with words, not necessarily sticks. We can also have the same proficiency in English. We also have pedigrees and backgrounds like they have. They can't dismiss us off as some hinterland lallus who don't know how to talk English or whatever. We have this thing in mainstream media or whatever. That is what I think causes the heartburn, saying how can someone challenge us in our terrain, using our vocabulary, using our finesse. So that is the problem.
And to be very honest, you guys are making a change because I will be very honest with you. Just like 2 or 3 years back, I was very towards the left. I might not have been that, I might have not read much. Even on the Sabrimala issue, I was very towards the left. I was like, I didn't know much thing. But then I read a lot of things by J. Sai Deepak, and then I was like, okay, this does make sense. This does make sense. The whole argument that he gave out is very much correct. And we need to respect religion, and religion may there can't be secularism because religion isn't secular. Religion says it's very much non-secular. So I feel you guys are making a lot of change. Anand Ranganathan has been my uh, I have a pleasure watching that guy. I always watch him and I'm like, wow, a conversation with him would be legendary because he has humor, he has wit, he has quotations every time. Whenever he comes everywhere, he has a bunch of quotations ready. So you guys are definitely making a change, and that's what is a burn all moment for those guys. I feel.
You being left and so on, or inclined that way. I remember my director of BITS Pilani, when I was a student there, used to say that up to the age of 25, if you are not inspired by the left, something is wrong with you. But after the age of 25, if you still continue to be, inspired by the left, something is terribly wrong with you, and because after that you legitimately have read more, you have got better maturity. After that also, if you still believe in that failed ideology which has been rubbished all over the world, then something is seriously wrong up there and you need to get it examined.
It's like till 25 you are a socialist or a communist. After 25 to 50 you are again a capitalist, and after 50 you are again a socialist. Who knows ki both are fuck all. I have to just stick to one of those ideologies. Like both of them, some of them thoda is fine. We are ending this. Thank you so much, sir, for being on the podcast, being a sport here, entertaining my silly jokes in between. I don't know how many of them landed. I don't know about that.
No, it was a great pleasure, Chirag, and thanks for some very refreshing questions. Like this video and also subscribe to the channel to keep yourself abreast of all the future podcasts that he's going to host here.